The Wherokowhai tomato. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I found a phonetic spelling of this variety and I've heard it pronounced dozens of different ways, so that's as good as we are going to get. I chose to grow this variety this year because I was curious about dwarf tomatoes, and this was one released by the Dwarf Tomato Project. I wanted more varieties that could be grown in containers if needed, and what also drew me to this variety was that even though it's a dwarf variety, it grows full-size tomatoes. They have rugose potato-like leaves, and the fruits are supposed to be round and kind of a yellow color with orange swirls. Unfortunately, I feel as though my experience with this tomato is not the same as everyone else's. The fruits are supposed to be more round, but mine have taken on wonkier shapes, and many of them are cat-faced, which is what this sort of webbing is on the bottoms of the tomatoes. And cat-facing is common, there's really not much you can do. They are usually grown from what is called a double bloom or a fasciated bloom, and if you notice them, you can pinch them off so that your plant can start producing more flowers that hopefully aren't fasciated. Cat-faced tomatoes are still edible, but it makes them more susceptible to cracking and then mold or pest damage. I have already had to remove several tomatoes from this plant before they even blushed because they were already cracking, or if they had blushed, you could tell that they were ripening extremely unevenly and parts of the tomatoes were rotting. Another thing that I've noticed is that the color on most of them aren't really yellow. The base of the tomato is supposed to be yellow with a little bit of orange swirls on them, but they seem to be more orange or even red in some instances. Also, just looking at the size of the plant overall, it is about as tall and as big as my non-dwarf varieties. After cutting into one of the tomatoes, they do look to be more yellow or orange on the inside, and flavor-wise, it's a tasty tomato. It just kind of tastes like your standard issue tomato. The flavor doesn't really stand out to me. It is slightly tangy and a little bit sweet, but the flavor is not very unique. I'm not really sure. Maybe I got some seeds that were crossed. It would make sense because the shape of the tomatoes are not what I was expecting, and the color seems off to me, and also just the overall size of the plant. I thought I got the seeds from a reputable source, but even from reputable sources, you can still get a mix-up or you can get seeds that were crossed somehow. Whether I got the right seeds or not, I am not going to grow whatever this is next year. While the plant is fairly productive, the flavor is not unique enough to stand out to me, and I wanted a dwarf variety, and this really does not seem like a dwarf variety to me. Now, if you were interested in this variety, you could still give it a shot. Your experience may be better than mine. For me personally, I would consider trying seeds from a different company sometime in the future, but for now, I'll be passing on it.